Heaven's Journey to Life. The Nakedness of the Forbidden Fruit, Day 77. To read this post, it must be understood that we're walking this process and blog, Heaven's Journey to Life, multidimensionally, which means each post covers one dimension, but is interconnected into and as multi-dimensions in our process of walking the point in question of who I am and how this I created and manifested this entire physical existence. Thus suggested to read this blog from day one, as many of the points in previous dimensions and days and posts are always brought through into the next days and dimensions and posts as all the dimensions interconnect, as the multidimensionality we've created and manifested as our separation as energy and consciousness from and of life and equality and oneness. Thus, if one is faced with this post and have not yet read this blog from day one, suggest that self first start from day one, as otherwise one will have no context of many dimensions that is walked in this post that has been dealt with in detail in previous posts. In this post, we're going to have a look at the story of the relationships between God, Adam, Eve, the snake and devil, the Garden of Eden, and the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, regarding the moment that Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and became aware of their physical nakedness and immediately wanted to cover themselves, physically from themselves and each other. In this, having a look at the sound, energy, and physical symbolism within this story within the context of our relationship to ourselves, our physical bodies, and sex and sexuality. I forgive myself that I haven't accepted and allowed myself to inequality and oneness within as energy and substance, the mind and the physical, from the beginning to now, seen, realized, and understood the sound, energy, and physical symbolism within and as the story of Genesis in the Bible regarding the exposure and awareness of Adam and Eve in their relationship to themselves, each other, and their physical bodies, where within what we have established in the sound, energy, and physical symbolism and manifestation of the eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil is that it serves as an inherent beingness imprint warning within energy, authority, and consciousness as God's relationship to its Eve, Adam, and devil existence within and as the manifested singularities, in ensuring that no equality and oneness and awareness exist within and between each other, as within this relationship of separation within and between the energies from the Eve as the negative, neutral, and positive energy circulation, movement, distribution, and accumulation to the atom within its friction and conflict relationship to substance, and the devil as the very reversing and consuming of substance and life and live into as energy, that within this separation, God, consciousness, and energy authority maintains its control over and of its own existence and origins, that the awareness and exposure that developed within Eve and Adam in the relationship to themselves, their physical bodies, and each other, the moment they ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, with this eating of the fruit as the merging and realization of their equality and oneness to themselves and each other, was actually, in fact, the moment they became aware of their equality and oneness with themselves as what they are as physical bodies in equality and oneness. Thus, I forgive myself that I haven't accepted and allowed myself to see, realize, and understand how, in looking at this story within the context of the manifested singularities, this equal and one awareness of themselves and what and who they are, as the Eve and Adam manifestations within the manifested singularities, would be the awareness of themselves as pure energy, and within that, the awareness that their existence of and as pure energy originated from and come from the very relationship of energy to substance. And so within this equal and one awareness of themselves as pure energy to substance, would in that relationship become an individual awareness unto itself, where the Adam and Eve manifestations would essentially realize their equality and oneness to itself as energy, and so their equality and oneness to the God and energy authority awareness of and as and within the manifested singularities, equal, which is what the God and consciousness and energy authority would not want, because it wants to maintain its own awareness unto itself, an authority within and as manifested singularities itself. And as long as its Eve, Adam, and devil existence within the manifested singularities do not see, realize, and understand that they are in fact equal to and one with God, consciousness, energy, authority, with and as the God, energy, authority as pure energy, simply existent as an accumulated form and manifestation of energy, God and energy, authority, and consciousness will maintain its authority within its existence of and as the manifested singularity. And thus, this warning existent within the story of eating from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, within the context of the beginning and having a look as pure energy's relationship to substance, is God and consciousness and energy authority within and as the manifested singularity securing its authority and making sure that the Adam, Eve, and devil existence of itself does not see, realize, and understand their equality and oneness as energy itself, with and as God and energy, authority, and consciousness, because as long as they are unaware, separate from themselves and each other as equal and one in energy, God and energy, authority, and consciousness can maintain its authority and control. In having a look at this story within the context of human beings, the mind and consciousness does not want the being and who we are to see, realize, and understand our beingness of substance's relationship, inequality, and oneness within as the physical body of substance. Because if we were to merge who we are and our beingness of substance within as the equal and one manifestation of substance as the physical body, consciousness and mind of energy would cease to exist. Because in our relationship within and between the mind, our beingness in the physical body, the very mind's consciousness and awareness is dependent on our beingness of substance, giving it the ability to exist, as well as our physical bodies of substance, equal to and one with, as it was in the beginning, with God and energy, authority consuming substance from the very beingness of the manifested singularity, equal to and one with our beingness in the physical body, where the mind consciousness system and its conscious and subconscious mind existence consumes substance from our very beingness to transform into energy, and then energy of and as the manifested singularity consuming substance from and of the external existence, equal to and one with the subconscious and unconscious mind, consuming from the very substance and physicality of our physical bodies to transform into energy. And so, the mind's entire existence is dependent on our separation from our own beingness from the physical body, as it had taken authority and directive principle and control over and of our beingness in the physical body. And as long as we thus continue in our separation from and of our beingness and physical body, the mind can continue existing. And so, within the context of the story in the Bible, the mind does not want the human to eat from the fruit as standing, being, and becoming equal to and one with our physical bodies and ourselves as the physical, because when and as this equality and oneness would manifest, the mind would cease to exist. I forgive myself that I haven't accepted and allowed myself to, from the beginning to now, inequality and oneness within as energy and substance, the mind and the physical, seen, realized, and understood the relationship of sex and sexuality to and as the physical body and ourselves in our relationship to sex and sexuality and the physical body, where what the story in the Bible is essentially showing, revealing, and exposing is the already existent separation of awareness within Eve and Adam to themselves and their physical bodies, where they were existing in separation awareness from their own physical bodies. And the moment that awareness of their physical bodies and equality and oneness developed, God punished them into eternal damnation, which within this proves thus, within the story of the Bible, that God created his own creation in separation, that as long as his creation maintains separation within the equal and one awareness of and as themselves and their physical bodies, they can remain in the Garden of Eden, where God and energy authority, within the context of the manifested singularities, would essentially say to its Eve, Adam, and devil existence, that as long as they maintain their separation of their awareness from themselves as energy and each other, they will have eternal life and energy in and as the Garden of Eden in energy. But if and as they would realize this equality and oneness as eating from the fruit, they would face the consequence of eternal damnation and not get and have eternal energy to sustain their own existence. Same with the mind today. God and consciousness would essentially say to the human being, as the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious and physical mind, that as long as they maintain their separation of awareness from themselves as energy and mind, beingness, and the physical body, they will have an eternal life of energy awaiting them and will continue existing within and as their who I am, as mind and energy, for the remainder of this life. And if and as they would realize awareness as the equality and oneness with their mind and beingness and physical body, they will face the consequence of eternal damnation, of losing the possession and experiences of their who I am as mind and ego of energy. Thus, the fear and warning essentially manifested within this story regarding the equal and one awareness of energy, and in the beginning and the mind now, is that one will lose one's possession of who I am, that one created, constructed, and manifested from energy for energy and mind. Because as long as self exists in separation from one's own mind, beingness, and physical body, with developing and manifesting one's who I am in and as energy and consciousness, what one is giving life to is energy, mind, and consciousness itself. So obviously consciousness would place in this fear of apparently losing who we are of and as energy, but we are not even a self, an individual, in fact, because all that we are had been created from energy for energy, and thus everything about and of self is for energies and consciousness and mind's continued survival and existence as energy. And that within this process of merging ourselves in equality and oneness with the mind, our beingness and the physical body, we will not in fact lose who we are. Energy and consciousness will lose itself and its separation and its existence of separation, yet as we return ourselves as mind and energy to substance and physicality, as the process of merging ourselves as energy and mind from separation to equality and oneness. Self, in fact, birth self from the physical as life. Thus, all is in fact in reverse. We've already lost ourselves into and as energy and mind. We've lost and missed life itself, and so ourselves to energy. And this process of returning energy and mind to substance and physicality is in fact the process of gaining life and becoming life. And so I forgive myself that I haven't accepted and allowed myself to see, realize, and understand within the principle of the process of reversing ourselves from energy to substance and physicality in life. It is to thus assist and support self within the process of standing and being and becoming equal to and one with self's beingness and mind and the physical body, for self to be and become the directive principle of self, the physical body, and so take in the position of responsibility of who self is and how and what self live for self and for all. And because sex and sexuality is a physical act of expression, with us separating ourselves from the physical body, we had equally as one separated ourselves from the very expression of and as the physical body, within and as and during sex. Where we had painted and tainted sex and nakedness within the context of secrecy and privacy, within multi-dimensional relationships and definitions and views and experiences, that's manifested to and towards one's physical body and sex as the evolution of the separation from our physical bodies and thus sex. Where our own physical bodies and sex is approached with an absolute separation, as the mind and consciousness is the one that benefit from this accepted and allowed separation from our own physical bodies and thus sex. In this, I forgive myself that I haven't accepted and allowed myself to see, realize, and understand how if one have a look at the creation process of God with Adam and Eve, it should be common sense that God would create an awareness of equality and oneness within Eve and Adam of and as their physical bodies. So, what does this thus mean? That the moment Eve and Adam developed an equal and one awareness of their physical bodies, God punished them? Why did God not create Adam and Eve with an equal and one awareness, with and as themselves, their physical bodies, and each other, and the rest of the Garden of Eden? Because God did not, in fact, create Adam and Eve with and as the physical bodies. God is and always has been this unseen force and source within existence, in separation from and of the physical body and its physical existence. And because the story in the Bible is a sound energy and physical symbolism of and as what we as human beings exist as the mind and God's relationship to and as a physical body, as our external existence reflect directly what we internally consist of and exist as. And thus, God and consciousness did not create the physical body and remains within its existence in separation from the physical body, and so this physical existence. So God, within the story of Adam and Eve, with punishing and warning Adam and Eve to not develop an equal and one awareness with themselves, their physical bodies, and each other, is in fact consciousness that within the minds of human beings maintain control through human beings separating themselves from who they are, and so thus the physical, to not expose the reality of what God mind, and energy in fact is. A powerless force that is dependent on separation to exist, that has to maintain control of itself and its existence within and as fear and warnings, separating the human being from the actual power of and as equality and oneness, as life, physicality. We'll continue in the next post looking more at the awareness of our physical bodies, inequality and oneness, and so also our relationship to sex, and the extent to which this separation from ourselves, our physical bodies, and so also sex, had proliferated much of the consequences that now exist in this physical existence regarding human beings' relationship to their own physical bodies and sex, and the extent to which we compromise, use, and abuse ourselves, our physical bodies, and so sex, simply because of not having, existing as, and living in and as that equal and one relationship with and as it. I commit myself to show how our accepted and allowed separation from ourselves, our physical bodies, and so within that, sex and sexuality as the expression of ourselves within as the physical body had manifested the consequences human beings experience in their relationship to themselves, their own physical bodies, and so sex and sexuality, regarding the extremes we can go to in compromising ourselves with and within our physical bodies itself, and so also who we are in relationship to sex and sexuality. That because children from a young age is not educated within an equal and one relationship with their physical bodies, and so walked through a process of understanding themselves in relation to sex and sexuality and equality and oneness, manifest much friction and conflict in the individual when and as their physical body and sexual processes start developing and manifesting. And because much of these experiences in relation to their physical body and sex is suppressed and hidden and not shared and spoken about within themselves, this caused much internal conflict and reactions and emotions and feelings as the individual is left to themselves to figure out their relationship to sex and sexuality and their physical body. And most of that figuring out for themselves comes from and through movies, magazines, conversations from and of a society and world system that advertise sex and sexuality and physical relationship from a visual, picture, and image perspective that the individual then try and attempt to copy and imitate instead of developing an equal and one relationship with their physical bodies and to sex and sexual expression within themselves. And then they're educated into sex and sexuality from the world and system and media, which further the individual's conflict and friction and internal experiences when they cannot seem to equalize their relationship to sex and their physical bodies as what is portrayed within the media and world system, within the movies and images and pictures advertised. And so the individual, with themselves and their mind, lives a life of a constant battle with sex and sexuality and physical relationship, and not understanding and grasping who they are in relation to sex and their physical bodies. I commit myself to show how the world system of money and consumerism within the industries of pornography, film and movies, magazines, and advertising exploit our accepted and allowed separation from and of our own physical bodies and sex and sexuality, where instead of us developing an equal and one relationship with our own bodies and so our sexuality, but instead try and imitate and copy and mold and shape ourselves from what is advertised within the world system, from and of which the world system benefits in the industry of sex and physical and image and design. We're in this process in our relationship to the world system with our physical bodies and sex. We further the separation from ourselves, our bodies, and so our sexual expression and relationship, and so further the internal conflict and friction in our relationship with our bodies and sex that proliferates self-judgment, comparison, and competition, from and of which the world system of money thrive as beings attempt and try to equalize themselves in their physical and with sex from the external environment, instead of realizing their equality and oneness within as it within themselves. I commit myself to show how within the principle of the reverse, that stopping the consequences we're facing in this existence regarding our relationship to ourselves, our physical bodies, and sex and sexuality is in fact standing and being and becoming equal to and one with and as it. That within the story of the Bible, all it is in fact proliferating is the consequences human beings are experiencing in their relationship to the physical body and sex, that is endlessly searching for the solutions to their relationship with the physical body and sex externally in separation of themselves. When what the media and world system is promoting as physical and sexual acceptance does in no way have the human being's relationship to their physical body and sex at heart. All it considers is the extent and amount of money it can make from human beings' separation from their bodies and sex that will never be complete and whole and fulfilled by anything and anyone external, because it is us ourselves that can only gift and give ourselves that absolute acceptance and conformability with who we are with our physical bodies, and so with sex and sexuality. In this, I commit myself to show how and why, withstanding and being and becoming equal to and one with your physical body, and so with your physical expression of sex and sexuality, and really seeing, realizing, and understanding that it is you, you would have an equal and one relationship with your physical body, honoring, regarding, and respecting your physical body, equal to and one with how you honor, regard, and respect yourself. And thus, in this, see, realize, and understand that sex is a physical expression of who you are and as a physical body. And within the principle of equality and oneness, would thus align self with a partner in equality and oneness, making a commitment within and between each other to within physical expression as sex, share each other physically with each other within and as the actual nature of sex with the physical inequality and oneness, where what stops thus in this process of developing an equal and one relationship with self, the physical body, and so sex and sexuality within a committed equal and one agreement, is the extent of abuse we put ourselves through in our minds, the extent to which we compromise our physical bodies in the separation from ourselves as a physical and sex, and the consequences this separation had manifested within human beings toward themselves, their bodies, and each other. I commit myself to show that with walking and investing in the What is Sex and Masturbation interview series, one will simultaneously come to understand one's current relationship of separation to one's physical body, and so sex and sexuality, and how to practically assist and support self and or one's partner in developing an equal and one relationship with one's physical body, and so sex and sexuality within and between partners. And with walking our agreement course alone, with a partner as the process of establishing an equal and one relationship with self's physical body, and or so one's partner, where with walking these interviews and this course, one will assist and support self and one's partner in developing and manifesting an equal and one relationship with self, the physical body, and so sex and sexuality, that will within this establish the new relationships in existence as agreements of and as equality and oneness, wherewith one within oneself and one's partner standing in equality and oneness with self, the physical body, and so sex and sexuality will align self with a prospective and future partner and one's current partner to really manifest relationships into and what it was supposed to be as agreements where individuals assist and support themselves and each to really grow, learn, and expand in actual physical living, instead of what it has become now, where each individually exists in separation from the physical and sex, obsessed and possessed in constant internal conflict with sex and sexuality and the physical, completely separated and individualized and preoccupied in the mind with sex and sexuality and physicality, which leaves no room for individuals to in fact change, grow, and expand in this lifetime, as we're too preoccupied with our minds, instead of focusing ourselves on ourselves, each other, and our living. And so within agreements, one's self-agreement and agreement with another in equality and oneness stabilize one's relationship with self, the physical body, and so sex and sexuality within agreements, to really start focusing on developing and growing and expanding as individuals and together into learning what it means to live.